registrable offender.
Poto Williams.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I just want to take perhaps a short call on this because I do want to reinforce the argument I've been running all evening on this bill on whether we've actually got this bill right, whether we've taken the opportunity to really craft the most appropriate and effective amendment that we can. Because I look at the departmental disclosure statement and see that that there have been various people. I think this is the right departmental disclosure statement. Is that right? Is that the same? Yes, it is. Okay. So the Department of Corrections have been consulted and supports the draft of the bill, but the following other agencies have been consulted on the draft bill: Ministry of Justice, Treasury, Accident Compensation Corporation, Crown Law, Ministry of Education, etc., etc. There's a whole list of agencies and organisations that have been consulted on the draft of the bill. And then I also see the SOP in the name of the Minister replacing October in Clause 7 with October 2016. So even though this bill has been given some thorough scrutiny because we've come back to amend a couple of clauses, even today, 5:34 p.m, we find another error. So, Minister, I'd like to know if you are completely satisfied that this is the last error that you will find, or whether we actually should take the time to scrutinise this properly. Yes, and as my colleague says, then perhaps we should send it to a select committee and actually do what we should do, which is look at this piece of legislation to make sure we actually get it completely right. We have been arguing this point since we started this process earlier this afternoon, and I'm starting to be a little uncomfortable about what else we might uncover, or we may pass this piece of legislation. In fact, we probably will within the next hour or so, unless we take the time to make sure that we get this absolutely right. We will be committing yet another session of Parliament to correct an amendment on an amendment. So how many amendments do we have to make until we get this absolutely right? And I cannot stress enough that the community, the public of New Zealand, want us to get this absolutely right. We support this legislation, but we want to make sure that the legislation is sound because of the impact it has on our children and the impact that will have on the public of New Zealand's trust and confidence in the House of Parliament to actually write appropriate legislation. So, Minister, I would welcome your view on this. You have been very generous in providing answers to questions as we've gone through this process, and as that's rightly so, because obviously there are other matters that need to be corrected as we've been examining this legislation. And I do want to thank you for providing this proposed amendment to the amendment. We could, yeah, I know this is a very serious matter. We could laugh about this, but this is very serious, that we cannot even get the date right when the two primary reasons we are coming here is to ensure that we include the right people on the register, and it's retrospective to the correct date, which is October 2016. So thank you for the amendment that you are proposing, Minister. I would hope that this is the last change that we have to make, but I am, on behalf of the people of New Zealand, starting to lose a bit of confidence that we have actually got it right. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Chairman, it does